Hello, mothers and friends. Welcome back to another episode of Carl Her Mommy, a podcast about motherhood as we know it. I'm your host, Carly, and today we are having a solo episode where I am chatting about screen time. This is a really big topic, and it's one that I haven't addressed in a full episode, but I think it's like an ongoing conversation and something worth talking about, especially with the colder months coming up and like sixth season and a time where I think moms may be relying on screen time a little bit more than they do in like the summer, spring, fall. Anyways, I want to start by just saying I view screen time as a tool. And it's a tool to allow me to have freedom. And I want to start out by talking about the positives because I think there are a lot of positives about screen time. And this is definitely not about to be a conversation where we demonize screen time or anything like that. And I also want to take a moment here to give a disclaimer, which is every single mom, every single family, we all know what's best for our children and what's best for our children at different seasons of life. There's no judgment about screen time. I am going to talk about like numbers and the nitty gritty that we use at different points. But at no time is that meant to be like for something for you to compare it to, or for you to think that like because your numbers are different that I place any judgment on that, because I don't. I know that you know what's best for your own kids. Anyways, let's talk about the positives for the kids because I think there are positives to screen time for children. For example, for me, I sincerely believe that it's a really good learning tool. I know this is goofy, but and this is a controversial show and it's one that like we don't use as much as we once did, but if you know the show Cocomelon, which most moms do, and especially if you're like a toddler mom or whatever, Liam learned so much from that show. I think like just basic learning opportunities, especially when they're in that like 18-month, 2-year-old range where they might like start to watch a show like Cocomelon. My kids have learned so much from TV and I don't take that for granted. Like things like checking both ways before they cross the road, learning their ABCs, learning how to count. All of those things are taught in a show like Cocomelon that's very like song and instructional based. So I really appreciate that. And then beyond that, with their other shows, I think there's way more learning lessons also. Like for example, Liam really likes a show called Octonauts, and that has like a lot of lessons throughout each episode about like taking care of other people, respecting boundaries, friendships. And I think that there's like a lot to be said for the fact that when they're watching those shows, they're picking up a lot on a lot of things. And another positive to the screen time is that as a parent, we are empowered to help them choose shows that we align with. So for us, like that can be touch and go. Sometimes I'll put on a show for Liam and I'll think it's going to be totally appropriate. Like I'll give an example of one that we don't do in our house. There's a show called Sammy and it's also about like underwater creatures or whatever. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. Liam really loves like ocean and underwater stuff. I'm just going to put it on. Well, I put it on and I realized pretty quickly like that there are characters in the show that are bullies. And obviously like in his real life, he's going to come across that someday, but at age 2, 3, 4, I don't really think that's age appropriate for him, or I don't see any reason for him to be absorbing that type of behavior and witnessing it and taking it in, when there are great options of shows that really like the characters are kind to each other, or they're more mindful of it, or it's like a very clear lesson and in a way that's not aggressive. Another new show that came out recently on Netflix is called Spirit Rangers, and they have really good life lessons that are like integrated throughout. And I also love that that's another show that's teaching about cultural diversity. So anyways, I think that's like another huge positive. It's just the learning aspect that kids can get that like you aren't necessarily sitting down to teach your kids every single day. There are learning opportunities for them to know about things. Liam could tell you more about the ocean than I ever could, thanks to shows like Octonauts. So I think that's really cool. Another thing that I think is incredible about screen time being a tool for children is like kids are like adults and they need sometimes to just chill and relax. And most adults will agree that like watching TV or putting on a show or watching a sporting event or scrolling on your phone or whatever it is, that screen time can be really integral to a time to just chill and relax and sit and like veg out and sort of take a moment to just relax. And I love that for our kids. Like I think that that's like a really nice way for them to be able to have a minute to just chill. And I think that's appropriate and I think that's a positive. Now, like, let's talk about the more important part maybe, which is like, why is screen time a positive for moms? It's a tool for freedom, especially if you have small children. So for me, if I can put on screen time, that gives me freedom to take a shower. It gives me freedom to cook dinner. It gives me freedom to finish up that last email that I was sending right before they woke up in the morning. And I'm not saying that you always need it as a tool, but for me as a mom, like to take, even if it's just 10 minutes of screen time to get that freedom for myself, for that shower, for that minute to finish my thought in an email, my quality of life is going up. Like I'm going to be way less stressed and frantic with my kids if I give them 10 minutes of screen time and then I'm showing up like ready, like present and done with my task, or like having done something that made me feel better, like put on my makeup for the day, whatever it is. I think that it's a really good tool. And I also think it's worth mentioning at this point that like from an accessibility standpoint, especially for moms who don't have a lot of help on hand, think single moms, think moms with spouses who work a lot or aren't that physically present, think, military wives, or people without a lot of financial resources who aren't able to outsource and get help to come in when they need to get these types of tasks done. Screen time can be your crutch. And I don't think there's any shame in that. And I think that each family has their own varying ability to make sure their kids are like safely occupied for a time so they can get something done and have a little freedom. And I think that screen time is an incredible tool for that. And that's how it's been used in our family for years. Now that I've like talked about the positives and the things I really like about screen time, I think it's worth talking about the drawbacks too. Because there are drawbacks. Of course, like you can do research about screen time and how much screen time kids are actually getting. And I always wonder like how they're studying this. Like I'll see completely different statistics thrown around on social media all the time. Like kids are only getting like this one is one that I'm like, okay, I need to check the sources because it's a certain brand of like mom or person who's putting it out there. But you'll see like kids are only getting on average 7 to 21 minutes outside a day at this point. I'm like, where's that statistic coming from? Because I just don't fully believe it. But I get the point, which is like, are we spending more time in front of our screens than we are outdoors, than we are moving our body, than we are doing something creative, than we are interacting and engaging with other people? And like another one of those statistics you'll see is that like kids on average are having like 6 hours of screen time a day or something. And also like I'm kind of curious if that includes like school age kids, toddlers, what it's about. But when you hear these numbers, like it can feel pretty jarring. Like we don't want our kids outside for 7 minutes a day, and we don't want our kids in front of a screen for 6 to 7 hours a day. Like that doesn't seem healthy. That doesn't seem balanced. And I think that like that's a pretty neutral statement. I think most women or mothers would agree with that feels like a little bit too extreme on one end of the spectrum. So yeah, that the drawbacks for me are like asking that question, like, am I relying on this a little bit too much? Like for example, if I need to finish that email that I was talking about when my kids wake up in the morning, like, is it possible that like instead of giving them screen time for me to finish that email, that I can give them like crayons and a piece of paper and see if they'll like free play by themselves? And so for me, that's like an internal dialogue and question that I have to keep asking myself is like, am I relying on screen time a little bit more than I need to be? Another thing that's obviously an issue, especially if you have toddler age kids, I think, but also I do think this applies to older kids, is like when you take away the screen time, are we spiraling into major meltdown mode and dealing with the repercussions of that? Because if like you tell your kid, okay, we're all done, it's time to turn off screen time, and then they're going to have a meltdown for the next 45 minutes, did that really like give you the freedom that you needed? Was that worth it? And I think there's like a conversation to be had around managing the meltdowns, and that's definitely a drawback of screen time. Another thing that I really like try to be conscious of is like, is this kind of like a numbing tool for my kids? Like, do they go into zombie mode? Like, do I think that they're avoiding getting out and engaging and doing other things because they're just like tuned out and full, like I'm locked and loaded on the screen for longer than I need to be? And I think that the reason that I consider this is because this is something I'm considering with myself about screen time. So especially now that like my work is very tied into social media and creating content, and then also doing the podcast and all the behind the scenes that go into like uploading it and posting reels and posting Instagram stories and this, that, and the other thing. Like I'm spending a lot of time in front of my screen. And then sometimes when I'm like overtired or at the end of the day or whatever, like I can find myself sort of tuning out and just scrolling instead of like dealing with something I don't want to deal with. For example, like say I have dishes in the sink and I know I need to go wash them or take care of it at the end of the night, but instead I just sit on the couch and I mindlessly scroll on TikTok. Like at that point, I have to be asking myself, is this screen time becoming a numbing tool and not actually something that's like adding fruitfulness to my life and like bumping the quality of my life? So I think that's a really big question. And then I sort of touched on this, but like, is there a different solution? That's the other question that I'm asking myself as like a potential, you can think of it as like playing devil's advocate with screen time. Is like, okay, you can give them screen time, but also like, can you just ask them to play by themselves? And for me, what this really looks like right now is for years, I have used screen time as my opportunity to cook dinner. Like that's been the primary period of time in which my children watch a show. Is by like 5 o'clock, I am pretty burnt out as a stay-at-home mom. I'm like ready for a break from them, if I'm being completely honest with myself. And also I'm ready to cook dinner in peace. Like I don't want you pulling on my leg. I don't want you asking me questions. Like I just want to sit here and make the meal and enjoy myself for a few minutes of peace. And for me, what that's always looked like is snap, put on the screen time. They watch for 45 minutes, whatever, however long it takes me to make dinner. And it's like out of sight, out of mind kind of. But what I'm realizing now is like they're hitting an age where there might be a different solution. And for us, what I think that looks like is free play in the playroom. Now we live in a space where they have their own playroom. They have a ton of stuff designated, toys, things that can engage them, activities. I could put down like a specific activity for them at this point, whether it be magnet tiles or getting out coloring or like paint sticks, something that would be engaging for them at their age and give them the opportunity for that. And this is like at the heart of where I am right now currently with our family is, do I need to rely on screen time as much as I am? Because for years and years, I have needed it. I've been in survival mode. It's been the only option with 2 kids, 2 and under at one point. Like, it's just crazy. But now that we're kind of coming out of that and they're getting a little bit older, do I need to choose screen time or can I choose free play for them? That's uninterrupted, unmonitored, and I just let them do their thing. And I'm testing that out now. Like, this is something I'm currently in the midst of. Like, tonight is the night that I'm not putting on screen time for dinner and I'm letting them try to figure it out. And what I know is going to happen, because I've like tested this in sort of different settings, but not in my dinner time hour that I've like kept sacred to myself for the last 4 years, is I know that they're going to butt heads. Like, I know that if I pull the screen time away that they've always been used to, and now I just expect them to go spend 45 minutes playing on their own without me like in the room sort of monitoring them like we would throughout the day, that is going to be an adjustment period for them. Like, this is a time of day that they've relied on for a long time to just be like relaxing and vegging out and sitting on the couch. And for me to ask them to do something different, it's going to be hard. And so what I'm going to try to do is be like, the first 20 minutes it takes me to cook, ask them to do free play. And then after that, like any extended period of time that I'm still cooking or preparing our meal, then I'll offer them the screen time. And I'm trying like really hard to go into this with the mindset knowing that it's going to be like a little bit cumbersome for me, in the sense that like they're definitely going to come ask me for help. They're definitely going to be crying. They're probably going to knock each other over. They're probably going to make a huge, massive mess in there that I maybe have tidied up throughout the day. And I need to like just be patient and give it a shot, because I do think I'm relying on screen time too much. And I do think that there's like an opportunity for growth and creativity and play and independence and bonding between just the two of them, for them to have that time completely like on their own in their playroom. And I think I'm almost selling them short by not offering them that opportunity. Like, I think that this is a critical moment where they deserve that type of like trust and freedom from me, and I need to give them that space. And obviously throughout the day, like we are all in the playroom, whatever, but it feels different to me because this is a time where I'm like sort of expecting them to do it without me hovering, without me engaging, without me being on the floor with them in the room. And I'm really excited for that. And that kind of like leads into my next like major point about screen time, which is that it evolves over time. Like one thing that we know as moms is at different seasons of life, we have different needs, and our screen time reflects that. So if you are in survival mode, you just had 2 kids under 2, or you're super pregnant in your first trimester, you're puking every afternoon, like, yeah, you're gonna sit on the couch and you're gonna watch TV, and your kid is too. That's normal, that's natural, and there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. And then on top of that, you have to think about the seasons, right? When it's summertime, we're outside all day long, we're playing, we're burning off so much energy. It's so fun. Same thing with fall. It's beautiful outside. You're still outside a lot. But then think about the heart of the winter. Not only is it freezing cold and is it like less accessible to get outside if you're from like the Northeast or Midwest or whatever it is that has all 4 seasons, but beyond that, you're sick. Like it's 6th season. Like you're passing through colds all winter long. And all of a sudden, if you were doing screen time for like 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, you couldn't be looking at double that, right? Like 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day, just by like virtue of necessity. That what else are you going to do? Like, and obviously like there are a lot of creative moms and a lot of moms who are thriving and doing a great job with no screen time in their house. And like, I think that's incredible too. And I think it's beautiful. And I think that's an amazing decision for the families who are able to implement it and do it in a way that makes sense for them. But for those of us who struggle with that, or who aren't making that choice for their family, it can happen very quickly that like you go from 1 hour screen time a day to like 4 hours of screen time a day when you are all like wiped out on the couch sick. And I think it's okay to honor that evolution. And I think it's okay to like give yourself some grace that if you have a week where you all have strep throat and you sit on the couch and you watch 6 hours of screen time a day because that's the best you can do, then that's okay. Like chances are your kid's going to be fine. They're just going to be fine. Like as long as they're getting nutrition, they're loved, they know how to get outside, they know how to interact with other people, and that's their baseline. To have a little bit of excess screen time during those hard moments where you really need a crutch, where you really need a tool that's going to help you get through, you just have to friggin' do it. Like moms, life is hard. Like it is hard raising kids, and sometimes screen time is just what gets us by, and I think that's okay. And I also think like along with the evolution, like I'm saying, like with the different seasons, there's the one end of the pendulum swing where you're using way more screen time than you're used to. But then there's the other end of the pendulum swing where maybe you can ask yourself like, hey, like maybe we are in a period where we can scale back on screen time, which is what I'm going through right now, which is why I'm kind of talking about this, because right now I wanted to give you guys a little idea of like what our screen time has looked like over the years. So when Liam was first born, we didn't do any screen time for him until 1 year old. That was fine. That was accessible. He just didn't need it. And then when he hit around like, I want to say 13 months old, when I got pregnant with Jude, was when we really introduced screen time for him. And that was because I was wiped out, super sick my whole first trimester, like throwing up every day for 13 weeks or something crazy like that. And we needed it at that time. And we were using a pretty good amount of screen time. And then we kind of scaled back a little bit, and when we were feeling better and it was the summer, and you know, he was maybe getting like just the dinner time window that I was talking about for the most part. Like I think we were doing 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes before nap time, 15 minutes before bedtime, and then 30 minutes-ish around dinner time at that age. So that was like probably close to an hour and a half a day that he was getting, let's say around age 2. And then Jude was born. And during that transitional period of like the dead of winter, Jude was born, COVID, like obviously COVID is a huge part of the screen time conversation that I haven't even addressed because we were all like locked inside of our houses for 2 years. And that was happening amidst Jude being born. So that's like a factor that played into this too. But at that point, when Jude was little, like I think his screen time got up to like 2.5, sometimes 3 hours a day, depending on my needs, because sometimes I would have to put him in front of the screen in order to get Jude down for a nap or in order to pump or whatever it was that I needed to use it for. And so the screen time went back up a little bit. And then the pendulum swing went back in the other direction, the summer seasons, all of that, our move, we were so busy. And we really scaled back on screen time and it wasn't so bad. But then at a certain point after our move, I've like gotten back into our just daily habits where I'm like a little bit more mindless about screen time in the sense of like, sometimes they'll watch TV for up to like 45 minutes before nap time. And that was never really a thing for us. Like it was never that extended. And also, same thing with like basically the dinner time hour. When William is around, which he's around more, they haven't been having it. And that's kind of where I've like started to realize like, okay, maybe they just don't need screen time at this hour. But that was building up to like 45 minutes in the like 5 to 6 o'clock time frame, or 6 to 7 o'clock time frame. And for me, so that we're looking at like, sorry, I'm not doing a great job explaining this, but we'll start off our morning. Normally Liam will wake up before Jude, and I will give Liam like 20 minutes of screen time while I like make my coffee and do my morning routine. After that, screen time is off. We'll turn screen time on again before nap time. Normally my goal is like 1 20-minute episode of whatever it is, but sometimes like that has become extended. And that's another place where I'm like, okay, can I be more mindful about this? Because I'm like putting it on and feeding them lunch a lot of times in front of the TV, depending on what we're eating. And I'm thinking to myself, like, instead of feeding them in front of the TV, why don't I turn off the TV? We all eat in the kitchen like normal human beings. And then I'll turn it on for a 15-minute show right before nap time. Like, that's an adjustment I can make. Like we are at a stage with a 2 and a 4-year-old where it's accessible for me to make that swap. And like probably a good idea. And same thing with the dinner time thing, where it's like, in order to cook dinner, I just put it on and I'm like, see ya, I'm done with you guys, I'm toast, it's the end of the day, I'm tired, I can't wait for your dad to get home, and I just like want to cook my meal in peace. But the other day, for whatever reason, like I just didn't turn the TV on, and Liam was like independent playing so well. He was being so creative, and Jude was just like sitting, singing a song to himself, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I not letting them do this every day? Like I was so proud of them. It was so cool to see that moment for them where it was like, hi Carly, wake up call. They're perfectly capable of having this creative time by themselves without their screen, and you aren't giving them the chance. And that's like an evolution that is happening currently in this moment, starting, like I said, starting today. I am giving at least the first 20 minutes of dinner time prep to them, attempting to figure it out and just free play completely without me like hovering over them. And it's funny because in the summer, now that we have a house, our kitchen window looks into our backyard and it's fully fenced, and the pool is fully fenced. And they like got in the habit of playing outside together while I was making dinner, and I could just peek out to them and the door would be open so I could hear them. They could talk to me. I could hear everything that was going on. They're loud. And so I know they're okay and everything like that. And that's sort of where they started building the muscle that I think they're like getting ready to, even in the wintertime when they're stuck indoors, play while I cook dinner. So yeah, that's part of the evolution. And what it comes down to is like, you can always pivot and change with your different seasons and with your kids' different ages. And the last thing that I really wanted to talk about is some like screen time recommendations. I read these literally 3 years ago. I don't know, years ago. So I know I'm going to mess them up. But if you guys have heard of Dr. Becky, she's really good. She shares things about like parenting and motherhood and tips and all of that. And she has, I think it's like 7 screen time recommendations. I'm not going to tell them all to you because I don't know them all off the top of my head. But I know that like my perspective on screen time was shaped by reading her tips. And this is like some tools for navigating screen time in terms of like the actual conversation you might have with your kids. So the first thing that I would say is set boundaries with your kids and give them clear expectations. So if you, for example, like they wake up in the morning and you know, like I want 15 minutes to make my coffee and sit down and drink it, and I'm going to give them screen time, prepare them for that. So like before you turn on the screen, look at your kid and say, hey buddy, I think what we're going to do is watch one episode. It's going to be 15 minutes long. And then after we're done watching our episode, we're going to make breakfast together. It's going to be really fun. You can pick out what fruit you want to eat today or something like that, so that they know I'm getting one episode and then we're done and then we're having breakfast. So they have clear expectation of what like exactly is to expect for them. And I think that's like really helpful for kids because then they aren't taken off guard. The next thing I would do is like, if you go to turn it off and they have those big emotions where they're like, no, I want to watch, acknowledge them. Because think about like you as yourself. If you're scrolling on your phone and your husband looks at you and goes, 5 minutes and then we're going to go to dinner, you'd probably be like, I don't like, that is annoying to me. I don't know. Like, I would be annoyed if somebody said that to me. And also, like, if I was in the middle of something, say I was like listening to a podcast and there was like actually 8 minutes left, not 5 minutes. And they were like, I want to leave in 5 minutes. You can understand how that's frustrating. Like, maybe William was saying that because we had dinner reservations, right? And so there's an actual hard reason why 5 minutes is the deadline. 5 minutes is the boundary. It's set and we have to do that. And you can think or imagine that if it's your child, maybe it's like 5 minutes until we have to leave for school. And so like you have to enforce the boundary that you set, but you can also acknowledge to them like, yeah, I get it. I get it. You wish that you could sit and relax for a little bit longer and finish your show, but today we can't. And acknowledging their emotions, I think, is huge. And then the second thing is like make it fun after screen time ends. And especially at bedtime, William has been really good about this where it's like, this is so dumb. Like only something toddlers would get excited about. But William will ask our kids, like when we turn off the screen time, like, do you want to run up the stairs? Do you want to walk super slow up the stairs? Or do you want to jump up the stairs? Like, and then he'll basically like chase them up the stairs. And they know that like they're given choices and something that's like exciting and silly to them and basic, that basically shifts them out of the mindset of like focusing on the fact that they're losing out on screen time and gets them forward thinking about the next thing they're about to go do. So I find that that's like really helpful too. And I know she lists like a bunch of other things. Like I think she recommends like sitting down and talking about with your kids like what they actually want as their own boundaries around screen time. My kids aren't old enough for that yet. I really have to like be the enforcer and the decider. But yeah, I think all of her tips are really good, and I would highly recommend checking that article out or her post on it, or if it was in a podcast or whatever it was. I'll try to see if I can link it on Instagram stories tomorrow for you guys. But in any event, like I said, screen time can change and evolve, and there can be like mom guilt and shame around it. But my opinion is like, don't feel mom guilt about it as best as you can, and give yourself grace and allow it to be a tool for your family, allow it to be something positive and fruitful. And if really overwhelming feelings of mom guilt are happening around it, maybe that means this is a good opportunity for you to pause and reevaluate and think about pivoting, thinking about changing, think about how you might shift your dynamics and mold things so that it feels more aligned. Like sometimes, most of the time our mom guilt is not justified and it's not real. But every now and again, if you're having like high key mom guilt, it's because your body is trying to tell you something. Like your intuition as a mother might actually be like, hey, this is too much screen time for us. I can tell because like we know in our hearts if our kids' behavior is changing in a certain way that's negative, and you can associate it with the screen time that's happening. Like maybe you can use that mom guilt as like a voice to guide you. And if it's just like, oh, I feel guilty because I see other people don't do any screen time in their house, or I feel guilty because this week I was super busy, I had a deadline at work, or I had a cold, or I'm morning sickness, or I'm dealing with a newborn and my kid had 15 hours of screen time. Like if it's just that type of guilt, that's just noise, and ignore it and let it go and do what you need to do to get by. Your kid is going to be fine. Your kid is going to be thriving and happy and good, and they know they're loved and they're healthy and they're fed, and you know, whatever, like fuck that type of mom guilt. But if it's the other kind that's like inkling like, oh, I think something is off here, I think I can readjust, I think we can do things differently, then just roll with it. And like anything else, you can always change your mind. You can always switch things up, and you can always adjust for it to make sense for your family in any given season. Anyways, now that I've ranted for a whole 29 minutes about screen time, let's wrap up the episode and do our gratitude segment. So if you can just pause, take a deep breath, and call to mind something you're grateful for today. Okay, today I am grateful for our new house. We're finally like starting to really unpack, and with the holidays around the corner, I'm just like feeling super grateful and excited to have a space to make like cozy and to start creating our own holiday traditions. I'm going to do an episode on this. I did an episode on it around the holidays last year about how I felt like we were too transient. We had never really like nailed down any good family holiday traditions, but that's something I'm really excited about for this year, and I'm excited to decorate our house and do all the little things. So that's something I'm really grateful for right now, is shifting into the holiday season and having a little bit more space to be creative and create something like really magical for our kids this year. Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, as always, please go ahead, rate, review, subscribe, follow along for more on social media, Instagram, TikTok at Carl Her Mommy. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for being here. If you haven't watched on YouTube yet, you can go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think that the link is right in my Instagram bio, but if not, just search Carl Her Mommy and you will find it there. And we will chat again next week.